All right, so we got to empowered monoliths about an hour ago, and we started doing a little bit of farming for Black Sun because we want to get the right blessing for the build. But I figured it's about as good a time as any to talk about this character because it is weird, sweet, unusual, using mechanics that I don't see other people using. Weird enough that we actually have an FAQ written up about the build, but we're going to talk about that in just a moment here. So let's give you a rundown of exactly what's going on here and why we're calling this a Doom Lich. So normally, if we're trying to scale our damage as a spellcaster, we have the flat damage of the skill itself, we have increases, more multipliers, maybe we debuff the enemies, things like that, right? So for this build, it's a little bit different. We have a skill that really doesn't deal much damage at all. Hungering Souls is necrotic damage over time, but we're not building necrotic damage. We don't have necrotic damage on our gear. So what is Doom? Doom is a mechanic that is most often, you'll see it on a ring like this. This is Siphon of Anguish. It says 27% chance to apply Doom on hit, and this rolls between 10 and 30. The most common application of Doom, well, Doom has a debuff that it places on the enemy, and Doom says enemies take increased melee damage. So the most often place that you'll see this is maybe a Void Knight, maybe something playing like Crit Rive or Crit Warpath. So here's how we're going to use it instead. Instead of using this for the debuff, we're going to use it for the ailment. And the ailment is a bit stronger than you might imagine. So bleed damage is 53 damage per second. So 53 DPS. It lasts for 4 seconds and it stacks infinitely. Ignite is 35 DPS and it lasts 3 seconds. Poison is 20 DPS and lasts for 3 seconds, but it also debuffs the enemy and lowers their poison res. Doom, instead of being 53, 35, 20, Doom is 400 DPS, and it lasts for 4 seconds. But it also happens to have a hard cap at 4 stacks on the enemy. So what this means is we can hit super hard. We can use any other skill to apply the Doom, but instead of being like a normal ailment build, we don't care as much about cast speed because we can have a limit of 4 Doom on the enemy at any given point in time. The reason that we're playing this build is that we have this axe. This axe is relatively uncommon, and we were lucky enough to get it from a Shade of Erebus. That's where damage is coming from. This has 100% chance to apply Doom on hit. We have one ring as well that has an additional 27% chance to apply Doom on hit. And Doom is similar to other ailments where if you go over 100%, then you're going to apply Doom multiple times. So I've got a 127% chance to apply Doom, so that's one guaranteed Doom, and a 27% chance to apply a second stack of Doom immediately. God, how do we even talk about this skill? This skill's so wonky. Instead of talking about these skills first, instead of showing you this screen, let's talk about how ailments work in Last Epoch. So in ailment, normally you see ailments like poison, ignite, bleed, things like that. So here's the important line of text for us. It says, each damaging ailment, such as bleed or ignite, or in our case, Doom, it has a fixed base damage, but that damage is affected by damage modifiers from the skill tree and the attribute scaling of the skill that applies it. So because we're using a spell that has a skill tree behind it, anything that is a generic increase to damage will scale the ailment as well. If it says something like hit damage, like this one right here, it says 100% more hit damage, this does not help us at all. But anything that's a generic more damage multiplier, or because this is an int skill, if we want to like stack intelligence, that would give us increased damage as well. But that is the way that we're going to scale damage. And it's also why we've selected this skill. So Hungering Souls, it's not a great skill. It's not something that you'll see very commonly. It doesn't have very good damage on it. But it has a lot of more damage multipliers. Some of them are a little bit wonky to make use of, but it's a lot of more damage multipliers. In Hungering Souls, we have 844% more damage. Let's show where that comes from. So first off, we're going to go down to the bottom here. This is the weirdest node. Souls deal more damage if you have exactly 3 minions. So 150% more damage. Then we have souls deal more damage for each minion you have. And we have 3, so this is another 18% more multiplier. Then we have souls deal more damage if you have at least 1 minion. So this is 60% more damage. Next up is all the way up here. Souls deal more damage over time. Doom applies damage over time. This is 100% more damage for us. So that's Hungering Souls. Because we're using minions, let's go on to the minion portion next. Normally, you wouldn't see some kind of summon skeleton or summon mage tossed into a build like this, but we need this in order to make use of our more damage multipliers from Hungering Souls. Because we need to have exactly 3 and not 4 skeletons, we need to make that as easy as possible to achieve. So what we've done here is we've made summon skeletons summon 3 skeletons at a time, and then we've limited ourselves to exactly 3. And we've done that by going up to 5 and then cutting it a half, and the game rounds that up to 3. So it works out pretty well for us. So if I click summon skeletons, I click it 1 time, I summon the goon squad, and they follow me around. If I click it 1 more time, you see that all 3 of them are resummoned because we have a cap of 3 skeletons. So let's walk through this. We come down here to remove skeleton archers out of the pool because we only want the skeleton melee boys. And then we have a more damage multiplier, but most importantly, we're cutting the number of skeletons in half so that we only ever have 3, and we're summoning 3 at a time. These nodes over on the right side, these are actually applicable, and it's one of the nice benefits of being summoned skeletons as opposed to being skeleton mages instead. So this is bone armor. They cast bone armor on each other, and they also cast bone armor on me. After that, let's jump over to Transplant. If there were any of the 5 skills that you wanted to drop, Transplant would be it. You could work in Aura of Decay if you wanted some extra regen. You could work in Wandering Spirits, which is actually what we planned on using from the very beginning, because they have like some more damage multipliers and they give you extra clear. But we felt like we didn't really need more clear, and we'd rather just have more mobility. So what do we have here? We have bone armor on the top left. We have some fluff nodes like Pool of Blood. This is probably my 19th or 20th point because it's not very necessary. And then over here, we have all 4 points spec'd into the 20% kill threshold. The last 2 skills we'll talk about, we're going to talk about Reaper Form and Death Seal. Let's go Reaper Form first because it's pretty obvious. Not too much spicy stuff going on here. But we have your health decays slower, all 4 points spec'd into Mistress of Decay. A little bit of extra cast speed coming all the way to the top, and some generic increases to our damage over here. Remember, we have a ton of flat damage in our build. The relative value of increased damage is much higher for our build than it would be in other builds. So even just things like this, even things like in our mastery, 7% increased damage, those 7% increased damage nodes are still pretty good for us. Our last one here is Death Seal. The first thing for us is to spec all the way to the bottom left, which is Deadlock. This locks us at 33% of our life, and it makes endurance and endurance threshold very, very good for us. And the second thing that we're spec'd into, which is pretty important, is this node up here. It releases Hungering Soul every second while we're in Death Seal. And Hungering Soul is our main skill. It uses all of the more damage multipliers that we're normally spec'd into. And what this means is during a boss fight, if we turn on Death Seal, we can just kind of walk around like this. We don't even need to click any buttons at all. And we're already going to have 4 stacks of Doom on the enemy. And we can spend all of our time avoiding mechanics without worrying about applying damage, applying buffs or debuffs. We can just kind of walk around, which feels excellent. Let's run through the masteries real quick. In the masteries, we're trying to scale damage over time, and we're trying to scale void damage. The Acolyte as a class really has very little scaling for void damage at all, which means that we're kind of running out of points. Even by like level 80 or 85, we're kind of running out of points. We're running out of points that we're excited about. But let's show you what we do have here. So we have Forbidden Knowledge, 8 out of 8. This is Intelligence and Necrotic Res. We've spec'd a little bit into some extra resistance here, just because we have the points and it makes my gearing easier. And then a couple points over here into Vitality as well. In Necromancer, we don't need this, but I kind of like having 1, 2, or maybe even 3 points in here. This is 5 life per point, and then when you cook a flask, you also get 10% increased cast speed. We probably don't need this, but I want to call it out because otherwise you're going to ask me why do we have 1 point here. So Lich, what is essential? We're scaling a lot of Doom damage, which is void damage over time, and we have extraordinarily low amounts of spell damage. So this node that gives us spell damage leases health, honestly, the 5 health per point on this node is probably worth a lot more to us than spell damage leases health. So at least for this point right now, we've not spec'd into this. So what do we have? We have Intelligence Mana Regeneration. We have damage and tripled at low life because we are using Death Seal. We're at low life very, very often. We're spec'd into damage over time from Desolation, Vitality, Intelligence, and reduced health regeneration. when we are in Reaper form, which we're basically always in Reaper form, we have no health regen anyways, so this is kind of a free roll for us, so we're happy enough to take this. We're expecting to 1 point here just to give us access to Contagion Engine. When we click on a potion for the next 4 seconds, we take 50% less physical damage and 50% less necrotic damage. Next up is Ageless Ascetic. This is 5 out of 5 points to give us cast speed, movement speed, and generic damage leeches health on hit. This does not work for Doom, right? Doom is a void damage over time, and because this says on hit, the leech here is not particularly helpful for us. On the other hand, something like this that says damage leeches health and increase health leech, this does fully benefit our build. So these nodes are excellent for us, all 5 out of 5. And then up here, last one, again, the spell damage, not so useful for us, but the increased damage over time does apply to the void damage over time. The rest of the points that we're speccing to are probably just going to be like mopey +5 life per point, or maybe some 6% increased damage per point, because we're kind of running out of points, because this is a weird build. We don't really have, you know, archetypical things to spec into, because I don't think EHG was thinking anybody was going to build a character like this. So let's talk about the gear. The mandatory unique item for us is Apathy's Maw. This is probably the biggest gate into playing this build. I don't think ours is particularly well rolled, but honestly, if you have any Apathy's Maw at all, you're good enough. Go ahead and play this build. We actually leveled this build from level 55 with 2 rings on, which gave us about a 55% chance to apply Doom on hit. It was okay, it was fine, but the build felt much, much better once we put Apathy's Maw on instead. The rest of your gear is going to look pretty normal. There's not too much spicy stuff going on. Crit Avoid, Life, Endurance Threshold, and Endurance. So let's show you the gear. +1 to Hungering Souls. If I could have any helmet, I would want something that had +3 to Hungering Souls. I think there's plenty of nodes in the Hungering Souls tree that would be awesome, and that's something that I'm looking for. In any case, we have Crit Avoid, Endurance Threshold +1. We have a little bit of damage over time and void damage. Remember, spell damage does nothing, but damage over time, void damage are excellent for us. For our 2 rings, we have 1 unique ring already, and the other ring should be something like Endurance Threshold, % Endurance, Health, things like that. Ideally, because we have so much flat damage and we have 844% more damage in the build, the relative value of having increased damage, like I said before, is really high. So I would really like to have, like, you know, double tier 5 void damage over time. That would be excellent for this. For our gloves, we have an endurance base because we need to fit in the rest of our endurance in the character. Just like for our chest piece, we have an endurance base here as well. It goes all the way up to 15. I can show you this here. It goes from 11 to 15 on the implicit. And the rest of this, there's not really too many more affixes for our chest piece that are particularly beneficial. I think my best chest piece is just like tier 5 vitality, tier 5 life, tier 5% life. And then maybe the other prefix would be something like +1 or +2, maybe even +3 to Reaper form. But that's about as good as it gets. We might go farm something like a Wings of Argentus because we're a pretty mobile character and we can even apply damage while we're moving. But really, I think just getting as much life as possible is what I'm going to try to do. For our boots, we have things like vitality, you know, whatever resistance you need, a little bit of crit avoid as well, some movement speed. And for our relic, somewhere in the build, maybe on the relic or on your belt, I think you want to make use of something like +25 minion health regeneration. This is something that we're going back and forth on, like whether this is worth a slot. Because if you had like increased damage, increased void damage, increased damage over time, those are very beneficial to us. So do we really need health regeneration for the minion? Well, we have it right now. We might spec out of this in the future if we find a better relic at some point. But really, if they die, I can just click one button and all 3 of them are summoned again. And that's pretty comfy to me. We'll see. We'll see if that changes at some point. Let's talk about our idols real quick. Because we're using Hungering Souls for clear and for single target, I wanted to get as many souls firing off as I could. And I prioritized this after taking Wandering Spirits out of the build. Because I just wanted like a little bit of extra clear, a little bit of extra consistency for a character. And the rest of this is just like maybe life, poison res, void res, fizz res, whatever you need to fill in the rest of your resistances. For blessings for this character, the things that we're going to be prioritizing are things like this. So we'd like to have % endurance. We'd like to have flat endurance threshold, which I think comes from Hayrot. In our Black Sun monolith, we'd like this leech rate to instead be chance to shred void resistance on hit. I think that about covers the character. I asked around a couple other streamers to see like, is there a meta of people playing strange builds? Are there other people out there who play things like this? Like, is there some group of people who try to make Doom work? And if there is, I don't know where they are. I haven't heard of them. So not only is this build sweet, but it's also like, it's got a couple of hipster points as well, because it's not a particularly popular thing to do. And it's got tons of damage. It has so much damage in it. For being a damage over time build that's not ailment, that's not crit, that doesn't care about crit avoid, that doesn't care about glancing blows or anything like that, it's been an incredibly smooth experience so far. I've been enjoying playing it. If you got questions or comments, you can either drop by Twitch chat at twitch.tv/PairThePig, or you can leave comments in this YouTube video and I'll try to respond to those as much as I can. So thanks for being here, appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.